Good day to all the lovely folks out there in the world. If I were to compile together a list of my favorite directors, then the hard-working, highly influential Italian craftsman Mario Bava would definitively be put high up, perhaps even at the top spot. I had only watched this 1970s psychological horror movie once about 20 years ago, and felt a bit indifferent about it, but after giving it a rewatch, I feel like it deserves to be talked about for the whole video, so I guess it's safe to say that there is more to this one than what I originally thought. I am Torstein from CinemaTerror, and this is Hatchet for the Honeymoon. Right after the opening credits, we are introduced to a man named John Harrington. He is in an unhappy marriage with a woman named Mildred, who is also refusing to grant him the wish of a divorce. This makes John seek out happiness outside of his marriage, and since he runs a very fashionable bridal boutique, he has a never-ending supply of young women to get acquainted with. He is also quite successful at this, since he is a well-dressed and at face value successful young man. But what the women of his desires do not know is that John has issues. Deadly, murder-lusting issues. His bloodlust is related to the work he has chosen for himself, and I will let John himself explain how his hateful view of women can be summed up.
A woman should live only until her wedding night. Love once, and then die.
There is a lot to unpack in that statement, and it is the perfect way to describe what is going on in the mind of John. And it is in his mind that we spend most of the running time, as his psychopathic traits are what this movie is all about. In many ways, this can easily be compared to both Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, and also the much more modern American Psycho by Mary Harron. The Psycho comparison will be easy to make, as that's what most movies that dealt with psychopathic serial killers will be held up against. But while Psycho didn't spend that much time with its lunatic Norman Bates, Hatchet for the Honeymoon is all about John Harrington, and the similarities with American Psycho becomes much more natural, as we pretty much view his life and demise in the same way we would with Christian Bale's character Patrick Bateman in that film. We even get to hear John's inner thoughts in the same narrative ways as in American Psycho.
The fact is, I am completely mad. The realization of which annoyed me at first, but is now amusing to me. Quite amusing. Nobody suspects that I am a madman, a dangerous murderer.
They are also quite similar as characters. Young, successful, attractive to the opposite sex, and absolutely bloodthirsting maniacs to the point where someone on IMDb has even listed this movie, especially the opening monologue that you just saw a glimpse of, as an inspiration for American Psycho. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but if it is true, then it does make a lot of sense and does of course not take anything away from American Psycho. There is also a supernatural element being introduced later on in Hatchet, which also made me think of William Lustig's Maniac. Not a bad couple of movies to make comparisons with. It's not an easy task for an actor to nearly carry an entire movie by themselves, and there are countless other similar types of movies that have failed in this, since you are basically asking the audience to be intrigued by the main character, even though you should despise him. I can again easily use American Psycho as a good example of this done right, and I'm happy to say that Hatchet for the Honeymoon also achieves the same. Much praise needs to be given to actor Stephen Forsyth for his performance as John, as he does a great job in delivering his emotions without going overboard, which I usually find in movies from this time period that have attempted to play with the same subject matter. You will of course not agree or like the John character, but it does get to the point where you can nearly understand his evil obsession, as he has a compulsion for keep doing it in order to make sense of a specific traumatic experience he had as a child. I also like most of the supporting cast, which includes the lovely Dagmar Lassander as a young model who quickly takes an interest in the new boss John. Lassander would also show up in several other noteworthy Italian horror thrillers, so I'm sure for some of you that she will be a familiar face. Another face European cinema aficionados might recognize is Laura Betti. She, who would also work with Bava again on Bay of Blood, plays John's wife Mildred. She is not portrayed as a very likable woman, but what we see of her is displayed through the eyes of John, who is not exactly a reliable narrator when it comes to his marriage. Mildred has an interest in the occult, which plays into the story in the final half. I found it interesting to read that the Mildred character was originally not supposed to be on screen, but was first added to the screenplay by Mario Bava after Betti had expressed an interest to him about working together. This script change did not turn out without behind-the-scenes troubles though, as it also meant that the Lassander character would get much less screen time, and this and other issues like the actual budget running out during filming made this into a very troubled production for everyone, although the negative experience for those involved does not affect the final cut in my opinion. The last character worth mentioning is Inspector Russell, played by Jesus Puente. He considers John as a suspect, and he works as a sort of ticking bomb for John, as he becomes more and more paranoid about getting caught and in some way realizes his days as a serial killer will soon come to an end.
It's hard to believe she wouldn't leave word with someone. Alice Norton and Jimmy Kane were to be married before long. Did you know that, Mr. Harrington?
Your visits are becoming too frequent, Inspector. They begin to annoy me.
To get back to Stephen Forsyth's performance here for a second. It felt like he and Mario Bava were incredibly in sync and how they wanted to portray John's inner demons. So it surprised me to learn that Forsyth didn't receive much direction from Bava during the shoot. Bava simply told him that he would let the actor know if he did something wrong. Before I read this, I was gonna go on about how directors who are mostly known for their brilliance in terms of visual style sometimes get overlooked when they get great performances out of their actors, but I guess this will not be the greatest example for that then. Regardless, it absolutely worked, and Forsyth did an amazing job that apparently did not need much adjustment. What I can undoubtedly praise is how great Mario Bava was with the camera. Although the budget issues did not give him much to work with in terms of special effects on Hatchet, but yet it is not something you will notice, as he takes advantage of all of his experience, knowledge and pure talent to make the film visually interesting. None of the camera techniques that are being used are that advanced, but they are done so well and precisely that you cannot be anything else than impressed. It's honestly hard to even look away, as there always seems to be something enjoyable to look at, even when nothing might actually happen within the scene that you are watching. And yet, nothing feels overdone. Everything is done to serve the story and characters, not just show off and put himself above the performers. In that regard, a movie that spends most of its time within the brain of a psycho killer is perfect for Bava, as he can go a bit crazy in terms of style, and yet it all feels like it makes sense, and feels like it is always following the mental state of John. I also love the smaller, subtle comedic touches that are brought to the film. It lightens up the otherwise very dark material, and makes the experience that much more enjoyable. As a fan of Bava, I also enjoyed seeing his amazing horror anthology Black Sabbath being used within this film, as it is played on John's television for a very specific plot reason. And not only that, the very same bed used in one of Black Sabbath's segments makes it return in this movie as well, which you know is amusing stuff for fans to notice and have fun with. Another cute little detail is that the screenplay is misspelled, I'm guessing on purpose, as screenplay in the strange opening credits, which to no surprise Bava himself put together. The same praise that I give Bava for his visual craftsmanship on this picture can also be said about the score provided by Santa Maria Romitelli. I'm not going to pretend that I was familiar with his name before this movie, or that I've heard much of his other work, which surprisingly only consists of 19 other movies. While all the technical aspects and character work will be enough for many, I do have to say that this is not a horror film filled with violence, so if you're getting familiar with the often super violent giallo genre of Italian cinema, and that's what you're after, then this might not yet be for you. In fact, I would not consider this to be a giallo at all. There is no mystery in terms of who the killer is, and I'm sure that people only put this under the giallo label due to the director and this coming out from Southern Europe. And I say Southern Europe as this is a co-production between Spain, Italy and France, with from what I understand the majority of funding comes from Spain and the Spanish producer Manuel Cano. If this movie was made exactly the same way by an American or East Asian filmmaker, then I doubt the giallo connection would ever be brought into the picture. So there's that.
And I'll see her features more clearly. Each time, more clearly.
John!
Hatchet for the Honeymoon is not one of Mario Bava's best regarded movies, and like I said earlier, I didn't care all that much for it myself upon my first watch. But this time, everything seemed to click much better as I both enjoyed the story, performances, and Bava's impressive camera work. It might be lacking a bit when it comes to suspense, but makes up for it by being fascinating. There's a lot more to unpack in this film, but I'm leaving some stuff deliberately untouched, since I do not want to spoil anything, as that would be stealing away from your own viewing experience. Hatchet for the Honeymoon gets a solid recommendation from me, and a terrific score of 4 out of 5. Have you seen Hatchet for the Honeymoon? If so, what are your thoughts on it? And are you a fan of Bava? Which of his movies would you like me to do a video on next? Spill all of your wonderful thoughts in the comment section below, and please click that like button, subscribe button, and your own buttons if you feel like it. If not, then that's perfectly fine. If you just so happen to be a fan of Italian horror, then I would recommend that you check out my video on what I believe are the 25 best Italian horror movies of the 1980s. Stay safe out there in the world, and I will see you next time, here on CinemaTerror. Thank you.